I'm Camille. Today I'm going to talk about creative letter writing, but first I just wanted to say if you notice there's been like a gap in the time between my posts, I try to every once in a while update a little note on my community tab so that you can see what's been going on in my life and why I haven't maybe gotten around to posting something for a while. So today I'm going to talk about something called a creative letter. This is a job in the international versioning department that is used for dubbing. So this can be used for dubbing television shows or dubbing movies or shorter material like trailers or interstitial, bonus material, that kind of thing. The name is a little bit misleading. It is not a very creative process to write a creative letter. It's a technical document which assists in the casting of voice actors in the foreign countries of the dubbed version of a film. So for everything I talk about, let's just assume that the original version of the film is in English, and so this is for any other language that might want a dubbed version instead of a subtitled version. The subtitled version doesn't really get involved in the creative letter, just dubbed, where they're replacing the voices of the actors with spoken voices in the other country. A creative letter is an aggregate of a lot of information taken from the dialogue lists, which have already been created, with other stuff thrown in there. So if you are hired to write a creative letter, you should request a previous version of one as a template or something that the company you're working for likes as how they want their creative letters formatted, and then you will need a dialogue list and cooperation with whoever is working on the dialogue list in order to have the most accurate, up-to-date information in the creative letter. The creative letter includes some basic information about the film first off, like how long is the film, how many reels, or this is television shows too, but I'm mostly just going to focus on film. Who the main cast is, usually taken from the end credits, and links to if there's an IMDb web page, or if the company that you're working for has a website already set up for the movie, you'll include a link for that. And then there will be more technical information which will be provided by the client. You don't have to know this part, you just have to make sure it includes it, which is like how they want the files transferred back to them, or who might need to approve voice casts in different countries. So that's not up to you as the writer of the letter. You just find out how they want. Do they want MP4 files back, MP3 audio only files back? Do they want samples before the casting is done of a lot of different people? Do they just trust whoever is casting it has done a great job in the past, so we don't care, whoever you decide for this? So that stuff the client will supply, but it will need to be included in the creative letter. The most creative part, I think, of the creative letter is writing a synopsis of the film. So you'll get early access to a copy of the movie, and you will watch it and make notes and write a synopsis. So the synopsis doesn't need to be as detailed as you might find like on a Wikipedia page after something comes out where a fan has written, this is what happened in the movie. It just needs to include basic plot information, focus on what is story or character important, and not get involved in too many tiny details that might not help in translating or need to be known to understand the gist of the film. After that, the creative letter is divided into sections which include things like lists of characters in a movie, the actor who plays them, a link to the actor's IMDb website, the actor's previous credits, the actor's age, the character's age, because they might be different. Like if you've noticed all of the publicity going out for Dear Evan Hansen right now, a lot of the articles are pointing out that Evan Hansen is 17 and Ben Platt is currently in his late 20s. So the age of the actor and the age of the character don't necessarily correspond. Then you will have a description of the character and a description of the character's voice. So the most important part of the creative letter is this description of the character's voice. This is something that takes some training to really understand what you're listening for and what things are important in a character's voice. So you will need to describe if there are vocal qualities that are inherent in the character versus if there are vocal qualities inherent in the actor, because only the ones that are in the character are important, really important for the dubbed version. So for instance, if you have a movie with a female character in it, someone like Emma Stone, you might be tempted to say, oh, she has a deep voice. Well, it's not necessarily her character that has a deep voice, it's just the actress happens to have a deeper voice. So on something like Cruella, you would make a distinction that when she is playing Estella, she sort of speaks normal, and when she is playing Cruella, she tries to sort of move her voice into a lower register when she's, you know, the eviler or more misunderstood character. So then you would note Cruella's voice is deeper than Estella's voice, but you wouldn't necessarily point out to begin with that Emma Stone comes into it with a deep voice to start off with. So that's one of the things that you need to pay attention to when you're doing the voice descriptions of the characters. Voice description is written for every character thought of as a main character. Let me also say about voice descriptions, you know, you would also want to point out things like if there's an accent only if it's character important. So like in Cars, it's important that not that Tow Mater is Southern, but that if you have a regional accent in your country that is thought of as having the characteristics of Tow Mater, sort of, you know, country bumpkin, not that smart, even though he turns out to, you know, always get things right. And just the sort of stereotypical, what does that accent bring to mind? Because there's not necessarily, when you say, oh, let's translate this into French, they're not necessarily going to be able to just say, oh yes, our Southern French accent. It could be something different where they might have, oh, well, that's the people who live out of the cities, they have that accent, or the people who live in this foreign territory might have that, the same characteristics that their accent conjures. I don't know. But so that's something else you would only point out if it's really character important. So someone like Matthew McConaughey or Reese Witherspoon, you might be tempted to say they have a Southern accent, or, you know, sometimes their Southern accent comes through, but it's not usually character relevant. It's just they happen to have these regional things that come through when they're speaking. So those are things you need to differentiate. And you'll need to, you know, talk about how just the affectations that the actor is putting on to help design and develop the character. So every character that would be considered a main character needs to have this section written about them. The creative letter then goes on to include a word count of how many words each character speaks. So this helps the dubbing supervisor in the foreign territories schedule time in dubbing studios so that they know, oh, this character speaks this many words, which means we need at least 3 hours with this actor to get all those words done and to make sure that we like the takes of them, whereas this character speaks 2 lines, so we can, you know, 15 minutes maybe is all we need in the dubbing studio. So that helps them budget how much it's going to cost to dub this into the foreign language and how much physical time they need in these other studios to get the dubbing done. The creative letter then will also include a section detailing any words or phrases which require special attention when they're being translated and dubbed. So this might be a catchphrase that needs to be spoken the same way every time. The annotations in the dubbing script will probably also say, oh, this is a catchphrase. We need to make sure that this is dubbed and translated identically, whether it's throughout a movie or whether it's from episode 1 of a TV show to episode 100 of a TV show, that it's something that needs to be consistent because it will be a catchphrase. So the creative letter will include notes about that kind of thing. It will also include notes about something that, just as the person who writes the creative letter is watching the movie, that they might notice where special attention might need to be paid to the translations. So for instance, if someone, if a character likes to speak in alliterations, they might include a list, oh look, this character, they used this alliteration, then this alliteration, and they prefer to use, rhyming words or something like that, where just extra special care that in case whoever is doing the translation missed it when they were translating from the annotations or dubbing list, or if the budget didn't allow for the dubbing list to include a lot of annotations, then the creative letter is like a secondary source for those kinds of things. The creative letter will also include a list of all of the on-screen text in a movie, because some territories might decide that instead of putting up text in their foreign language when they're doing, this is just for dubbed versions, so this is not subtitles. Subtitles, they wouldn't have a problem just throwing up another subtitle, but for budget reasons or creative reasons, for a dubbed version, they might not want, if a character's reading a letter, they might not want to just have a translation of the letter superimposed over that as text. So this, the creative letter includes a list of all of the on-screen text so that whoever is doing the dubbing supervising in the foreign country can decide, oh, the character's just gonna suddenly read this letter out loud. They're not on camera, we're just looking at the letter. They can just read the important words, and don't need to know the whole letter. So all of that text is included in the creative letter so that someone else has the discretion, how do we want to treat this in our foreign dubbed version. Then there will be a list of songs and a list of something called ditties, which will have specific instructions for the dubbed versions. So a lot of movies, even if they're dubbed, like say Selena Gomez is the star of your movie and she bursts into song at some point in the movie, her contract might say you can replace her voice everywhere except when she's singing, because she's also known as a singer and we want her singing voice reflected in everywhere in the world. So the creative letter will include a list of songs, and it will include instructions based on contracts and from the client. Are we able to dub this song into our foreign language? Or do we have to either just let the song go and we don't care what she says, or subtitle it or something? And all of that is, the client has to tell you. You can't guess. So a song is different from a ditty. A song is more likely to have music behind it, and is something that if you were going to sit down and learn it, you might be given a lead sheet, which is just the lyrics and the melody line written in musical notation. So if you can pick up the song without needing to see the notes, or there's no music in the background, so if someone is like, oh, I'm twinkle, twinkle, little star, that might be considered more of a ditty. So there's a separate distinction between songs and ditties, and some of it is legal, like I said, with what can be dubbed and what can't. And so the creative letter includes all of these things and instructions on how they should be treated in the foreign countries. So here's a mock-up of a creative letter. It's got the title, a picture from the show, explanation, this is a creative letter, what the format of the video is,
writer-director, table of contents. These are hyperlinks that you can click on it and it will take you to that section of the document. What date this creative letter was made or updated. If you were doing another update, you would add a subsequent date below. And then you would highlight that in some color. You just rotate through the colors as you need to for each update, and then anything you would add during this update would be highlighted also in that color so that it's easy to see what information has been changed, who created this creative letter. Then we get down into the sections, so the link for the official website, the link for the IMDb website if there is one, the runtime, the version that was watched for this creative letter writing, the main characters, if any casting approval is required, or if it's up to the dubbing supervisor, you could put a note for each of those different characters. Temp mix policy, just some instructions from the client on how they want the temp mix handled, the story synopsis, main characters, that an instruction just to make the match as close as possible to the original voice, and keep in mind characteristics of the person who's speaking, although if they're not character related, then they're not vital that they be included. Then here's our main character. This would be a hyperlink to the IMDb webpage also, but I didn't do that right. Character's age, actor's age, recent credits, a little description of what the character is doing in this particular video or show. Then here's a description of the character's voice, and I've added my cat here just so that you can see there's another character. Then we have the word count. I do all the words. These are my cats, they have no words. These are the feral cats outside, they have no words. But they do have here, these main characters would have a whole section above which has the description of their voice, whereas the other characters, minor characters, might just have a 1 or 2 sentence description of their voice here as they are given their word count. Those are my feral cats. They didn't have any words. This you could do like bullet points with time codes of different notes of things where I was talking about like catchphrases or alliterations, things to keep in mind that are maybe not as obvious just from going through the dialogue list, things to draw special attention to here. Then these are the text that might appear, so like the name of the episode, the name of the series. I have little video clues in between that have like cards, so those will be here too. Then the official end credits. If there were songs, the songs will be listed here, including writing and publishing information and any special instructions on if they can be dubbed. If there were ditties, they would go here, and then technical, just information about how the files should be delivered back to the client. So that is basically what a creative letter will look like.
I can tell you the people who have had the longest careers writing creative letters and who enjoy it and really get how to do it are professional singers. They're just a little bit more in tune with hearing the different vocal qualities and describing them. So you don't have to be a professional singer, but you need to have a good ear for those things. So other than that, I would say there's not a ton of qualifications. I mean, basic, you need to write a synopsis that makes sense, that is in proper English, but it's not the same scrutiny as a dialogue list or a spotting list, because this is not going to be translated. It's just a tool to help other people, and you will probably be submitting it to someone who will then proofread it before it goes to the client. So you know, it's good if you can write and string a few sentences together and write a good synopsis of the movie, but having the same kinds of interest in the minutia of English is not necessary. So basically I would just say good ear, and singers usually have that. We had one creative letter writer who came to us who had been doing this for a while and was also a dubbing supervisor. And he got a little too busy doing dubbing supervision, so he brought in his friend who was also a singer, and he trained her and said, here's someone when I can't handle the project, give her the project, I have confidence, I've trained her myself. If you find someone who writes creative letters, which could be a dubbing supervisor, or one person we worked with ran a loop group. So, just ask around, see if you know someone who does it, and get them to train you, get them to have you as their assistant on a project or two, and then, hope that as they get busier with other things, they'll throw some work your way and you can get into it that way. Occasionally, if you are just already in an English department doing other things, dialogue lists, annotations, spotting lists, they might, throw it out there, hey, can anyone write creative letters? So if you can write creative letters, you can also get into it that way. And that's, when you're in an English department, you'll also have access to a lot of creative letters to look at, so you can review them and try and figure out on your own how they're put together and how they're critiqued from the client, what stuff works, what stuff doesn't, what's important. So if you're a good self-learner, then you can do it that way too. So this is definitely a freelance job. This is not a job that you will have as your full-time work, and as freelance, it's not something that you will be able to maintain as just a creative letter writer. So as I said, one of our creative letter writers was a dubbing supervisor, so he did that more and just did the creative letters on top of that for some extra money. The other creative letter writer then was a voice teacher and occasional performer, and then she started writing creative letters for us, and she was already youngly but retired from working at Disney, so she didn't have the need for a full-time income and job, so it was great for her to do that. And then someone else was a loop group supervisor, so they would do the loop group stuff more often and do creative letters if they should come their way, and then get extra money from that. So you're not going to be able to find a full-time regular job writing creative letters. It's just something that if you know how to do it, it's another thing you have to offer and another avenue for income in the entertainment industry. A feature is going to be the first version, which will be the most labor intensive, and usually a feature gets 3 different versions sent to the scripting department. So the preliminary 1, preliminary 2, and final. So for each of those versions, you will be hired to make any changes that you need to the creative letter, but only the first version pays great, and then the updated versions get paid as updates, which they expect, the first version is expected to take you a few days, whereas an update a few hours. So there you can sort of gauge what the pay difference is going to be on those, but you have to accept the work for the updates, or whoever you're working for is not going to like you, and you're not going to get to write the next creative letter for the big, good first pass version money. You're going to be out of there. They're not going to use you anymore. So my friend, the singer who writes creative letters, I asked her for some input while I'm making this video. So I just asked her what she likes best about writing creative letters. She liked getting to see the movies early. Sometimes you might see a movie 2 years before it comes out. Yeah, I can't tell you. I worked on a movie over 2 years ago that still hasn't come out. I think it's coming out in October. So you're bound by a confidentiality agreement that you can't talk about the projects until they've been released. But she liked getting to see projects early. She found the input pleasant, which I'm not sure I'm not sure anyone finds input pleasant, but okay. She liked that it allowed her to use the skills she had as a singer, describing pitch, timbre, intent, different qualities of voices. She thought the synopsises were difficult to write, but that they improved her writing skills overall. And she liked working with me because we're really good friends now. So from that standpoint, even though she's not doing it anymore, it worked out for both of us. The downsides, when I asked her that, she didn't like the deadlines. The deadlines, as you can imagine, on all of this stuff are kind of tight, especially for the final version, because a lot of times when the final version goes out, it could be, okay, well, the movie is coming out in that country in 3 days. So they'll record a lot of the dialogue in advance, but then if there are any big changes between like P2 version and the final version, they might have emergency dubbing session time booked and are waiting for these lists to come through so that they can get in there and record 1 or 2 words that they need to make sure that everything is done and can go to the theaters in a few days when it's time. We had one client who was very particular. So he never approved a single synopsis that she wrote, to the point where I was the supervisor of the department, and I started saying, okay, you're not writing it this time. This person's writing it. That person's writing it. This person's writing it. I'm writing it. We all took turns writing the synopsis. Every single synopsis, I don't want to say rejected, but they all came back with significant notes. So I think that was just a particularly difficult client. It wasn't anything she was doing wrong with the synopsis writing. It was just nobody of the 5 or 6 people who we had try to write the synopsis got past him as being acceptable without tons of notes. She also didn't like including the text part, because that's not a very creative part. That again is just part of the technical format of the document. So she would get our dialogue list, which had all the on-screen texts and narrative titles in it, and just have to copy and paste and make sure that if there were changes that she didn't miss any of the changes. So it was just sort of manual labor stuff. And then she says she didn't like the grind, but she loved the money. So the money is pretty good for, extra bonus, what my mom and her friend would call shmoo money. So just, it's not great money if you need this, if this is like, this is my job, I need this, I need to pay my bills. It's not that kind of job. It's the kind of job where, okay, my job is I'm a dubbing supervisor. My job is I'm a voice teacher. This is my shmoo money. This is my money in addition to the money that I need to live. This is the money I can go buy shoes with, or I can save it up and I can go on a vacation. So, it's good if you are in a position where you can take a shmoo job, and this will be one of them. All right, so writing creative letters is something that you might be interested in adding to your arsenal of skills. But like I said, don't expect this to be your full-time job. I don't know of any companies that have someone on staff who just writes creative letters. It could be someone who does dialogue transcription and then has the added burden sometimes of writing the creative letters, or it's entirely freelance who writes the creative letters. So if you have any questions about creative letter writing, please feel free to ask them below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can see all of my videos about all sorts of different things and learn about some of the other jobs that are going on in Hollywood.